Welcome to the Holistic Grief Coach podcast, the podcast about shining your light and rediscovering purpose after loss. I'm Kaylee O'Connor, grief coach, integrative trauma coach, and founder of Good Grief and the Holistic Grief Coach certification. Here we're opening up conversations about grief and the journey of reclaiming your identity when life has changed forever. You'll hear inspiring stories from certified holistic grief coaches and other guests, as well as solo episodes from me where I'll share tools, teachings and truths from my own path along grief. So if you're here to rebuild and rediscover who you are after loss, or if you're looking to become a grief coach or find some purpose in your next chapter of life, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hi Ciara, welcome to the Holistic Grief Coach podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Kaylee. I'm really good, actually. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that we've had to reschedule this a couple of times, so I'm glad that we're finally here and we're getting to chat together and just getting to know you a little bit more and hearing your story a little bit more, because you've been on quite a big journey, I feel. So we're just like landing in that. So I was wondering if you could start just telling us a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your story.
Just as you asked me, that is so funny. The dog came crawling literally under my chair. And she's actually tickling me, and so excuse me if I'm moving strange. There is a dog underneath my legs. So the grief. Oh, now you can probably see her, Kaylee. Sorry about that.
Okay.
My grief journey kind of began all the way back in 2009. So I'd just turned 30 actually. So my dad passed away, but he was poorly for quite some time. So he had been diagnosed with cancer in 2001, I think it was. And so I was very young when he was diagnosed, in my early 20s, like 22 or 21 or something like that. It was quite scary, but I think because my dad and I, we were not very close because my parents divorced when I was super young. So although, we loved him very much and everything, he moved out into the countryside. So me and my brother stayed, in London with mum. And so when he was diagnosed, it was a shock and it was really quite traumatic. But he kind of stayed in the countryside, and my older brother went to take care of him, make sure that, he was looked after, and was mainly his advocate, I would say. But when he passed away in 2009, Kaylee, it was so shocking because I always say I still had the mentality of like a 29-year-old. So I didn't feel, at all sort of prepared to deal with that kind of shock and that kind of trauma. And it was very different, I found, to the grief with my mum. So 8 years later, my mum passed away. So they kind of passed away 8 years between each other, which, I guess in one sense I'm grateful for, because it prepared me for my mum passing in one sense. But in another sense, the grief experiences were very, very different, I guess, because of the relationships that I had with both my parents, which were very different. So I think with my dad, it was very shocking because he was the first person that I'd actually lost close to me in my life. And I remember just thinking before, grief is just sadness. That's all. It must be just sadness mixed with shock, but you don't realize that it's actually complete dysfunction and like you're not in your body for you just feel like you're walking around outside of your own skeleton, really, for want of a better expression. And that's how I felt with my dad. And with my mum, the experience was different. We knew she was sick. We had a good idea, but I didn't realize that she would get so sick so quickly and be taken into hospital. And the difference, Katie, between my dad's hospitalization and my mum's was my dad was always lucid and with us, conscious. Whereas with mum, when she was hospitalized, she was within about 2 weeks put on full life support. So for probably around 2 to 3 months of she was in hospital for 9 months, but for the first 3 months, she was on full life support. So we didn't get to speak to her. She was completely suspended into a medical, world, coma. And so it was almost like, I look at it like she was present, but she was unpresent all at the same time, which I believe came with its own kind of grief, because you're grieving someone that's still alive, but it's like a suspended, frozen. So that's sort of takes you up to speed with that kind of story, with my story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's hugely different losses, and I'm really I'm glad that you mentioned how different losses for one person, you can have two very different experiences, and that kind of sums up the nature of grief in the sense that, yes, it's universal and we'll all experience it, but it's so personal. And when you lose somebody, it doesn't mean losing another person will be exactly the same, and doesn't prepare you for that grief. So I thank you for sharing that kind of vulnerably, and just highlighting that those two different relationships were very different in terms of grief for you, and a lot of loss to have experienced over that across that 8 years. It's really destabilizing, isn't it, to have that foundational shift?
Absolutely. You just nailed it, Kaylee, with the term destabilizing, because obviously with mum, it was a case of she had heart disease, and she also had a lung condition, so she'd been diagnosed with those years before. So me and my brothers had an idea that she was poorly, but we didn't realize how very quickly she could go from, I've always described it as hero to zero. How she was at home 100% independent, shopping, going to the hairdressers, having her nails done. She was such an independent woman. And she went from being that woman overnight, quite literally. So it happened. So my mum got poorly, at the end of 2016. And she kind of went to sleep one night, and then literally woke up unable to breathe. So I had to get her help very, very quickly. And that's how quickly life changed. So she went from being that person at home to being someone in hospital for 9 months, so the destabilizing piece that you just mentioned, I went from being, just a normal, a daughter, working in the city, Kaylee, going out twice a week with friends, loving life, dating, doing all these things that you do. And I kind of overnight became my mum's patient advocate and grieving at the same time, but not knowing that I'm grieving, because there's no information in hospitals to tell you, oh, by the way, if you're struggling to cope with a loved one's ICE intensive care admission, which is where my mum was, these are the symptoms and support that's on offer for you. And there's nothing like that. Families are just put into this, I call it like a medical dimension, where there is no information and there is no resources to say, look, this is how you're going to feel. And especially in long-term hospital admissions, it's incredibly shocking to be in that environment.
Yes.
Without going into detail, the equipment and the noises and the smells and just everything. And in my mum's case, she was in a specialist heart hospital in London. So she was looked after by a whole team of doctors, but it was a case where I was her primary next of kin, and my brother was her secondary next of kin. So because she couldn't speak or make medical decisions on her own behalf, we had to do it for her. But the problem is, Kaylee, we were being told 2, maybe 3, 4 times a day, your mum's going to die. She's going to die. She's not going to make this. And so we're dealing with incredible shock and grief, but we're also having to make clear decisions about her health. Yes. And what the best thing to do, what to do. So I got to a point where about a month in, I was not able to function at all. I was it was really difficult. I remember being in a supermarket in Waitrose, I think it was, one of those supermarkets near the hospital. Me and my brother went there after the hospital. So we'd be there for like 10 hours a day. And we were going home to grab a pizza or whatever. And I remember him saying something like, Ciara, what do you want on the pizza? And I remember thinking, I don't care. I don't care what's on the pizza. Like, I just don't care, And I couldn't believe that it's so weird, because I used to compare how I was to how my brothers were coping. And I was thinking, how can he care about what's on the pizza? Does it matter? Mum's passing away. It makes no difference. Nothing mattered apart from her making it, essentially, and being okay. And that was really hard. And I used to compare how my brothers were coping to how I was physically and visibly. I was not coping, but they were. And I'm not saying that my experience was harder than theirs, but if you were to look at it, if you were to sort of look at it from the outside, you'd think, well, Ciara's not coping, but her brothers are. But my brothers were dealing with their own grief in such a different way, and I think there's something to be said for the functioning piece that you mentioned. It was super destabilizing.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really hearing that sense of like overnight, your role completely shifted, and you're going from,
your mum being a hero, as you said,
Yeah.
but then you being somebody who has to make these big decisions and be navigating daily chronic trauma in that environment. Yes, it's huge. And when you think about your journey, and you mentioned a little bit about who you were before losing her, and that kind of going out in London, working in London,
Yes.
you're such a vibrant personality, the person, you've got this lovely energy to you that's infectious. I'm curious to know how you saw yourself before loss, and then how that kind of changed when you went into that destabilization that we've just been talking about.
Such a good question, Kaylee. So the girl I was before my mum got poorly and before she passed, because I think they're very similar. Before she got poorly, I think I was, well, I believed in magic. I said that a lot during our training, especially in peer coaching. Like everyone would say to me, oh, Ciara, what did your mum represent? And I always say, for me, she represented a sense of magic in the world. She was the seasons felt like seasons, Kaylee. Christmas felt like Christmas. She was an Easter person more than anything. She loved Easter. So, the whole house would just be regenerated during Easter. And it was just this amazing uplifting feeling of being loved and having that magic, excuse me, surrounding you. And I guess also I saw myself as, it will sound quite strange because obviously I was an adult when my mum passed away, but almost innocent. My mum protected us. She was very protective, I would say, and she protected us from the harshness of the world, I think. So even though we were fully fledged adults out there doing what adults do, just her being here, her presence in the universe gave us that magic and protection and sense of innocence. And I honestly felt hopeful about things. And when she passed away, all of that was unraveled, but it didn't happen overnight. It's not like I woke up the morning after she passed away and didn't feel magic anymore. It was a slow burner over many years, over 4 or 5 years, where I would just think the world is just not the same anymore. Things just don't feel like the same anymore. And I think I also mentioned the secondary losses quite a bit through training as well. And that obviously was the compounded grief that definitely added to the challenges of losing mum, and yeah, so I would say I was definitely that sort of magical, happy, trusting, I'd be the type of person, Kaylee, I'd be out in a nightclub or somewhere and I would just hug people and just be so trusting. And, I was quite introverted as well. I've always been a bit like that, but I was a lot more trusting. And now I just believe that losing mum and sort of going through that whole experience from then to now has just made me a lot more reserved and a lot more, I would say, practical. Okay. Which could also be just a part of growing up, but also I believe that those things were lost, that magic, that sense of magic and hope.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really relate with that. I always think about growing up, we were literally taken to Disney most years. We're very lucky to be brought up in the most magical place on earth. But my dad was, the life and soul of our family gatherings, and he always made things special. And so I really relate to that, what you're sharing around your mum creating the magic and, creating and showing you love, and going from this kind of free, innocent space to then thinking, oh, I've got to be thinking things through and I've got to be more detailed or whatever it is. I totally relate.
And I love your story about, your dad. It's, so much of what you've said in your content, Kaylee, and in training, just it always touches me because I don't know your personal experience, obviously, because, it's going to be so different to mine, but just sort of generally thinking about parent loss, it really is so untethering. It really is, and so, thank you for just doing everything you've done.
Oh, thank you for being part of it. And that word untether, I think, is so important, because it is that, you've had that person to mirror back to you who you are for your life. And even, if you didn't have a good relationship with your parent or caregiver, there's an attachment to that person. And when you then lose them, that untethered feeling is very visceral, but it's so real in the sense that it is like, okay, what's important to me now? Like, how do I do this now? Like, what is, this reality without them in it? It's such a profound loss. It ripples you know, more than anybody can realize, into other spaces of our life and our identity and how we see ourselves.
So true. I mean, everything you've just said, it just, again, it's just like, I can totally relate. It's such a lonely experience as well, Kaylee, because when my mum passed away, I was 38. So I was at that, I was 37 when she went into hospital and 38 when she passed. But I was at that stage of my life where you kind of either have children or you don't, for me. And so because I was her advocate for 9 months in the hospital and sort of taking care of her a little bit while she was still at home, I kind of missed that opportunity to do or not, you know, to have children or not. And it really, like, I would be at the hospital, and I always remember this lady I saw on the tube on the way home one night. So my mum was really poorly at this point, so it was probably right at the beginning of her hospitalization. And I would often stay at the hospital like 10 hours a day. So work was just I was so could not function at all, Kaylee, for the first 6 to 8 weeks. So I was really lucky to have to work for a company, sorry, that understood that and did not question my absence at all. But I remember going home one evening from the hospital, and this, you know what it's like, you're on the packed tube, and it's embarrassing, and the tears start, you know, coming through the eyes, and you're like, here we go. And I always remember this lady, she had a newborn baby with her. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, no, I've just got this really horrible cold right now. So my eyes are a bit watery." And she knew, it was like she gave me this knowing look. And she just said to me, "Yeah, that's going around at the moment." You know? And I remember me and my brother would refer to these people as like angels, just random strangers, but we referred to them as angels at the time because they just, you know, I don't know if you experience this, Kaylee, but when you're going through that extreme level of trauma and stress after losing a parent, you are living at the emotional extremes, aren't you? So you feel everything to such a high extreme. So if someone on a tube would say, "Hey, are you okay?" I would feel that immensely to the extreme.
Yes.
You know, and also deep sadness, obviously, to the extreme as well. So everything was so exacerbated and huge and monumental. And so I think that comes down to the piece around our nervous systems and how they are in that sort of window of tolerance and how we sort of float around the different areas of the window, which obviously we learned in the training program. But I didn't know that at the time. So it's like I'm just feeling everything on such a deep level. It's so strange.
It's scary, I think, to be like, what, you know, what is going on? I remember getting the nickname Crazy Kaylee the first few years after losing my dad. And it was because I'd be quite like a hyper person. And like, if I was laughing, it was like crying, belly laughing. And it'd be like these extremes, or I'd be silent. And it'd be like this, and people like just couldn't read me. But I loved theatre and dance and art, and was very expressive. I just felt like I just needed, yes, these spaces to feel. And you're right, the emotions and almost the sensory overload of it all. So yeah, and I am a highly sensitive person. I didn't know that at the time. I'm a sponge, so I feel off people. So you're in a home, and you know, my brother's grieving differently to me. You're feeling it, and it's chaotic whirlwind of emotions. You can't explain it necessarily unless you've been in it.
This will sound really weird, but just off the back of what you've just said, I've always said, not that I've ever, I mean, we've all experimented on some level when we're teenagers, but I've never really taken drugs. But I can imagine grief to be like a drug because you're not really in control, really. You are and you're not, but it's like this, I call it like an oscillating experience. Like, so you literally are, Kelly. I mean, you're not in your mind. Like the moment that I always say, you know, with my dad, I honestly, I remember this is one example of how I went from just being one person to another. When he was like sort of passing away, the last few days of his life, let's say, I remember my brother getting me this random hot dog from somewhere because he lives out in Kent. So my dad was there. And honestly, Kaylee, it took me 2 hours to eat this hot dog. And the hot dog was only this big, it's tiny. And I remember just like, I looked like I had literally been spiked because I was just sitting on this chair in this waiting room, staring out the window, like I was just out of my mind trying to eat this hot dog, but just like taking tiny bits of bread and just staring out the window. The whole hot dog was completely untouched after an hour. And the bits that I was able to digest, it just felt like concrete. I just couldn't eat. And I remember thinking, I've been sad before. I've experienced heartbreak. This is not that.
No.
this is something else, and I can't describe it, you know?
So yeah, I mean, I actually got asked during university who my drug dealer was, and I'd never taken drugs, and I was like, what do you mean? It was again because whenever they saw me out, there were these extreme emotions that I'd be like, and I was always just like high on life. I always said I tried to do anything to keep me up because I didn't want to go down. But then I would be crashing, you know, crying in the bath and just blaring out all different music. And it's just such a, it's like you're in a different reality. So yeah, I can completely relate to that like metaphor of it, and like how it's this almost like, I don't even know what the word is, but it's the dissociation, isn't it? Of actually you're not in your body, like you said earlier. I love that analogy of like, it's like you're out of your skeleton. Like it is that.
Yeah. And imagine you're having, and the world doesn't get it. The world is not set up to deal with grief, right? So you're having to explain to your employer, oh, by the way, my mum is still alive, but she's kind of not. And I can't function properly. I barely know what day it is or what time it is. You know, much less respond coherently to a client and actually make any sense. And I remember, Kaylee, my uncle from Ireland calling me, and it's so weird how the world responds to grief, isn't it? It's so weird how they talk to you, how people talk to you, because I was obviously just like so bad, and he said to me, "You sound really down." Like, did you just hear what I just said? Like, mum's not, she's not gonna make it. Like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to speak, like, you know. And I was so angry, Kaylee. I was so angry. And actually, to be really honest, I was so grateful for the anger, because the anger, I believe, I used to pray, because if I used to think, if I'm not angry during her hospitalization, then I'm going to be sad. And if I'm sad or scared, I can't be her advocate because I can't think straight. So I used to almost pray, please let the anger last, because the anger gives me the strength and the, can't think of the right words, but I guess the courage to go into the room and see what I'm seeing and actually say, yes, do this, and or no, don't do that, you know. And I used to pray for the anger because it just felt so empowering, as opposed to just being totally thrown out of your own body by sadness or fear, which was 90% of the experience, to be honest.
That's such an interesting like reflection, because I think so many people don't realize that with grief and with the situation you're in, you know, you can't fight or flight it, and you know, you can't, you're in it, and so the nervous system does want to go into that freeze. And so kind of imagine almost that anger being that fight of like, right, like this is going to be the way I find my power, and you know, advocate for her. And you know, and it just shows how then chronically you have to be in that state, right, of your nervous system really like protecting you and helping you to get through those months. And then obviously the grief that's still very much here, but like these strategies that we, you know, you pray for, or that your body does for you. It's like how, you know, how we navigate this thing called grief. I'm curious, Ciara, to know, when you think about, you're reflecting on all of these moments, and you think about you sat in front of me today, what do you feel like have been important turning points for you, you know, for working with your grief?
It goes without saying that the training, you know, with you, with the beautiful 6-month, you know, grief coach training program that I took part in, met some wonderful people throughout. That was probably one of the most recent turning points, Kaylee. So I've said it so many times, and I honestly mean it. Like, you've created such a beautiful program, and I believe that, anyway, that was definitely one of the turning points. I think coming across your profile, thinking this looks interesting, this person feels like, you know, I remember looking at your content. One of the turning points was you mentioned something around, and this is before I signed up, this is way before, something around anxiety. I thought, that's so strange, because I feel exactly this way. And I can't exactly remember what you said, but it was, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? And does this happen? And does this happen? And I was thinking, yes, 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 yes. This is it. This is it. Something around, I think I remember, do you crave connection, but avoid it all at the same time, or something similar to that? And I remember thinking, I've been doing that ever since my mum passed away. And actually even before, while she was still hospitalized. And it's like you have that hunger for connection, but you're also so dysregulated. Well, not you, me personally, in that connection. And that's the only way I could describe it. So when I saw that, it was a massive turning point for me because I felt so seen in that moment. You're not just saying things like, do you feel anxious? Do you feel sad? You're actually breaking it down into an actual experience that makes you realize and makes you think that is actually a turning point for me. So the grief training program, another thing you said, which I use, by the way, and I say quite a lot, is grief throws fertilizer on what was already there.
Yes, the weeds.
Oh my God, that is just so, like, that is groundbreaking. You need to trademark that, Katie. I honestly think that is just, I mean, that is for me, that is just one of the biggest sort of phrases and turning points for me in the program. And another one is something you said around grief being a boundary rupture. And I think you said that right at the beginning.
Yes.
At day one, which it is, isn't it? You know, we're having to constantly live with a violation of our boundary, something we didn't ask for, which poses so many different challenges. But before the training, I guess another turning point, Kaylee, was, I guess it's kind of a strange one, but it's realizing no one can save me but myself. You know, no one can save me. And I think in the beginning, for the first 5 years, and the beginning can mean different things to different people. The beginning could be 10 years for someone, right, in grief. Everyone has a different sort of idea of what that is. But like, yeah, I think realizing that people who, especially people who haven't grieved before or lost a parent, like they just don't get it. They can't save you. And so it was realizing I have to find my own way through the woods. I have to find my own version of survival without relying on everyone else.
So powerful, and such a hard thing to come to terms with, isn't it? When you have lost somebody who would have been somebody you look to for support or guidance, and being like, okay, I've got to do this now. That turning point, I feel like we almost fight it because it's like, I don't want to. And at the same time, but I have to. It's the both, isn't it? We talk about the both and it sounds like that was a really powerful part for you. And I know you're a writer, which we haven't talked about. And it's making me think of like the hero's journey.
Oh yes, I write about that a lot.
It's making me think of you as you're the hero and you are fighting through this like void of pain and turmoil and destabilization. And then, you know, there are moments along the way, sometimes helpers, sometimes guides, and sometimes the guide, or all the guide needs to do is put a mirror up and say,
yep,
you can do this. And I think that's what coaching is, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's holding that space, you know, and really allowing the person to really unravel their own experience. But you're just holding them, not really holding them, but you're just creating that safe, structured container that you taught us so beautifully. And honestly, it's just phenomenal, Kaylee. I mean, I'm just thinking about the program versus, you know, some of the therapy that I've had to deal with the group. So just thinking about like coaching versus therapy, it's such a different experience. But for me, coaching sort of addresses all those multi-layers. And whereas obviously, you know, I think therapy is lifting the lid, but not necessarily securing it afterwards. So a lot of people are lifting up that lid after therapy, aren't they? Talking about their experience, going home with an open lid and no resources and no safety, which is quite dangerous in many cases. And I found that to be the case. I turned to bereavement therapy a few times after my mum passed away. And it didn't necessarily do any harm, but it didn't do any good either.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, and I think everybody, you know, depending on who your practitioner is, who your coach is, you can have different experiences, some brilliant, some not so good. And I think it all comes back down to, is it trauma informed?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think every person who offers a service to another human, you know, hairdressers, beauticians, they could all benefit from a trauma-informed certification just to create safety. And I love that lid analogy of actually, where's the structure? Where's the containment? Because grief is this chaotic, messy, wiggly, you know, line of never-ending stuff that you said, unraveling, and it needs containment, it needs something, some structure, and I think your coaching is designed for that. So I love that.
Quick pause in today's episode. If you've ever felt the pull to turn your own grief into purpose, to support others with compassion and confidence, this is your invitation. The Holistic Grief Coach certification is enrolling now, It's a 6-month trauma-informed training that equips you with the tools to guide others through grief while also transforming your own journey. To find out more and join the next cohort, simply DM me the word certification at goodgrief_UK on Instagram. Now, let's get back in and enjoy today's conversation.
Are you okay to talk a little bit about what drew you to the Holistic Grief Coach certification?
Absolutely. So it's kind of off the back of what I said. I remember I followed loads of different grief accounts on Instagram, you know, just to obviously find my experience somewhere in the midst of content and accounts. And I followed quite a few people, Kaylee, you know, and I don't know what it was. I just remember reading a few of your posts and thinking, yeah, it almost, and I remember I got very emotional on the last day telling you this, but it's not going to happen today. But I remember just reading your content and feeling as if you were just literally, you got a mirror and you just held it up to what I was going through. And that was very hard because not even a therapist was able to do that. And I'd been in and out of therapy for many years after. And I honestly thought, whoever Kaylee is, like, I need to work with her, or I need to somehow get closer to what she's doing, because this is groundbreaking stuff. This isn't just talking. This is connecting to your body, to your spirit, and to all the multiple layers that we studied, you know, the mind, body, spirit, emotions pieces of the Holistic Grief Training Program. And I just knew everything that it literally felt like, as I said, you just held up a mirror and said, this is what you're going through, isn't it? No one was able to do that. No one.
Well, I'm glad that I could do that, because I feel like, you know, some of my favorite things are when I get messages from people who are like, thank you for putting into words what I've had going on for 10 years and nobody's ever been able to explain. It's like that real sense of letting somebody be witnessed and seen. And if that's all I do for them, one person, I've done my job. And so obviously it's amazing then when someone like you connects with something that I've shared and then comes into the world and trusts me to train you. Like that's an honor. So yeah, I'm so grateful that you've done the program, and you're, you know, such an amazing soul. And I think you created almost the community in our cohort with your energy, and I think everybody agrees with me. You've got such a lovely energy. I love seeing you every week. So
Kaylee, likewise. It was that lovely window of time for twice a week, wasn't it, where you just log in and you're just in this space where you feel so safe and so seen.
Yes.
And I mean, I honestly think that, yeah, your family must be just so proud of what you've achieved. I mean, I definitely am, because unless you engage in the program and you go through the program from start to finish, it's impossible to know how phenomenal it really is. But it really, really honestly is. I mean, everything, I think one of the main things, you'll probably ask me this actually, but one of the main things that stood out for me was the stuff around regulation. So, you know, when you lose a loved one, particularly a parent, you mentioned something around regulation, co-regulation, and self-regulation.
Yes.
And when you lose a parent or a loved one, that becomes unwired or unlearned. So then so our job is to help clients find their way back to self-regulation. I'm not explaining it as well as I would like, but that always stood out for me, Kaylee, because I really think that is what happened for me when I lost my mum. I co-regulated so well with my mum.
Yes.
We were so attuned to each other. We were best friends. And then when she passed away, it was so hard. And it goes back to that piece that you taught us around connection in safety and connection, and safety in stillness.
Yes. Yeah.
And I always remember that. And I think, oh yeah, that's it. So if I don't feel regulated, there's something going on in the company of others, I mean, which has been a struggle for me, which we may or may not get to today. But it's finding that connection in safety and connection in stillness. Stillness, I don't have much of a problem with, but it's in connection with others that's always been a challenge. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, you know, realization of the relational grief and connection is so hard when we've got that destabilized connection with ourselves because it was connected to the person we've lost. It's all connected, isn't it? And I'm really glad that kind of resonated with you. So there's so much, and I can't ever explain to somebody when they say, what's in the program? I'm like, you know, I'll go through the modules, but we cover so much over the 6 months, and it's, you know, each person will have a different takeaway from that. How do you think the training impacted your own grief? And I know you had your peer coach every week as well. So how do you think it impacted your journey? with your grief?
A great question, Kaylee. So I just think that it was that twice a week safety and then the peer coaching. So then we had that consistent structure every week where no one in the world can replicate that level of safety and that structure and containment that you created in the program. So I think that was one of the first life-changing aspects of the training for me and how it impacted my grief. My peer coach was phenomenal as well. You paired us really good, but it's so weird. Me and I don't know if I can mention her name, but anyway, we talk often about how you were able to pair people so amazingly off without really knowing anyone at the beginning.
Yes.
And it was just the way it all came together, Kaylee. It was just beautiful. But for me, it's impacted my grief in that I used to really judge my own self a lot for not feeling the way that the rest of my family grieved my mum. So you know what platitudes are like, right? Ciara, it's been mum would want you to be happy, and we covered so much of these things. So now when I hear them, I'm like, okay, and I just go off and I connect to resource, I take that break and I say, it's okay, I'm allowed to grieve however I want and whatever is coming up for me. And I think that the training has really helped me deal with that self-judgment around feeling or not feeling a certain way. And I think just the education, Kaylee, as well, around, that connection piece. I one of the biggest challenges I had and still have, to be honest, to some degree, but my nervous system has expanded since, but it was actually being around others for long periods of time. So I struggled with that a hell of a lot in the beginning. When I say the beginning, until recently, being around family members or friends for longer than 2 days I would just feel incredibly dysregulated and then go into shutdown. And so my nervous system would become very spiky in those connections. And I didn't know what was wrong with me because I'd never really experienced that when my mum was still alive. And so that was a massive challenge. And I think the turning point in the training was actually, this is, what's happening. It's that education piece around fight and flight and freeze. And that's really, really helped me and actually helped, with the tools and the regulation and, the resources that we learned in the program to actually know how to bring myself back. Sometimes I have to go into another room when my house is full of family and just take a few deep breaths, hand on the heart, 5 minutes, ocean breath, amazing. And just connect to that resource that, we connected to 3 times a week in the training with you. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I feel like it's that sense of like reclaiming your choice and giving yourself options, and because you've learned more about your grief, you can then apply it to your grief to say, actually, let's alleviate that self-judgment and let's work with this. And I think that's always my goal with my clients, is like, how do we work with your grief rather than see it as something we want to get rid of or push through or something that's bad, and say, okay, here it is, this is how it shows up for me, and this is how I can work with it rather than judge myself for feeling or reacting this way. Sounds like you've been able to hold its hand a little bit more.
Yes. And I can always see you guys in my mind in the cohorts, just thinking, and it was also just the cohort as well, Kaylee, hearing everybody's experiences and doing the breakout rooms in training, and I would just honestly just feel so seen, and just everything people were saying. So this is just unbelievable. Like the fact that we don't tie certain things to grief amazes me. It really, really does. But I think that you managed to provide that education and that learning and that sort of regulation so well, and I really think it was life-changing for me.
I'm so glad to hear that, and like all the different components, not just me but the people in it and your peer who you get to work with, every week for 6 months. You build a really great connection, and it's so nice when I hear that you've actually made a friend.
Yeah, I've made more than one friend. Like we have a whole group, Kaylee, a whole support group that we just, we stay in touch, and we're always checking in with each other and supporting each other. And everyone's, so beautiful and so heart-led, and so we're just a beautiful,
beautiful community.
How lovely are we? I'm joking.
No, but one of my things that I couldn't, guarantee or predict was who would sign up to the certification. And you do your best to create the structure for relationships and community. And I've been in many certifications where community isn't something that is possible because maybe there's too many people on a cohort or things like this. So it's really important to me. And I was so lucky with the people that have signed up and the community that is here, because honestly, I feel like I found my people. And you're all so just committed and dedicated to the work, and the biggest hearts in the world. And I think I'm like, well, of course, because to do this work, you have to be this way inclined. But honestly, like, I feel so happy and honored to have connected with you all and to have this community of people that I'm a part of. So it's been really lovely to have that too, from my perspective.
I mean, you said to us, at the end, which was I found it such a beautiful, emotional last day that we had on the actual training. And you said, I wanted to overgive. You really did. You really did. And you gave us the education and then some, Kaylee. And it was the other aspects after, that, yeah, you just went above and beyond, I think is what I'm trying to say very, very badly. But I honestly think your mission and your dedication to the grief community and how you've helped so many people, and including myself, is just, I'm just so grateful. I think just ever so grateful.
Oh, so nice.
I'm not crying as well, which is amazing. Don't know what to do today.
How are you doing for time? Just want to check
in.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about you then, a little bit about how has stepping into this work changed your purpose and kind of your mission?
So I write in, I think I mentioned this to you, Kaylee, before. I already write in the mental health, addiction, trauma space. So I always feel like I had some advantage while on the training, because I obviously have the lived experience of grief, but I also write about it quite a lot, because grief can be connected to addiction. It can be one of the aspects that leads up to it, one of the factors. Grief is a trauma, anyway. So I write about that directly and indirectly pretty much every day. But it was such a nice and almost like a seamless transition for me to go from what I do in my day job for writing for my clients to start working with clients in a grief coaching capacity. Obviously, it's completely different in what I have to do, but the mindset and the empathy and the compassion, I think, and just the understanding of the nervous system and the safety aspects as well, which we take very seriously, don't we, in coaching? I mean, it's it's everything. I think, so that sort of natural progression from the writing aspect. If I was writing about milkshakes or smoothies, it would have been very different, But because every day I'm writing about, addiction or trauma. I've written quite a few trauma courses for clients in the past. So I kind of had that understanding and awareness. But it was never really specifically applied to grief. It was just trauma in general, very sad stuff, very difficult stuff. But so I kind of and I remember, Kaylee, in year one of writing, say I would write about, I don't know, PTSD. I would finish a piece of work or even just get halfway through, and I'd have to take a break, and I would be in floods of tears because it was really hard. And I think about actually how probably harmful that was to do that without any supervision, because I was writing about some serious stuff, serious cases. And but also equally, I think working with clients and obviously all the nervous system regulation stuff you taught us in training has really helped me to almost get used to it in a way. Although it's really hard, to hear people's stories, especially if they're super sad. And again, I still have a tendency to cry, as you know.
It's all good.
It's not going to happen today, don't worry. I guess for me, it's been a more easier transition. Had I have gone from what I was doing before I became a writer, which was working in the city for a research company, I think I would have found it emotionally more difficult, because I'm very, very super sensitive as well.
I can see how, you're already in a space of understanding, and then, bringing that bigger understanding to your work. It's all complementary, isn't it? And the work you do as a writer is complementary to you as a coach. So I can see how your work all kind of comes together. And what would you say if you were somebody maybe listening to this, they resonate with your journey a little bit and they're kind of lost in their grief right now? What would you say to them?
I would say your experience is valid, that however you're feeling, I mean, to say the word normal is, but it is normal. And any reaction is normal in grief. I would say that listen to your own intuition and to your own natural experience, and don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be feeling this, or you shouldn't be feeling that, or you should be feeling this, because how you're grieving is a mirror of what your person means to you. And there is no right or wrong way to grieve.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love that idea that your grief is a mirror of the person.
With my mum, Kaylee, it was, as I said, most of the grieving was done while she was poorly in hospital. So it was kind of just having to deal with the stress of advocating for her, and also dealing with the lack of information around what was going on, which was grief. We didn't know it at the time. We just thought it was stress. And as I said, there was no one around, and I would look at people and just crave to be them. Like my mum's nurses, they were so amazing. They would be like, oh, I'm going to see my dad in Ireland for Christmas, for instance. My mum got sick at Christmas, and I would just think, you're so lucky. You're just so lucky. Like, I would do anything to be in that position right now, just to have that normality back. That's what you crave, don't you?
Yes.
And you crave the ordinary, because your life has become anything but.
Absolutely. And I think that gives people hopefully some permission that sometimes, and this is where people who haven't experienced this can't quite understand, that it's, the phone call on the way to work, or hearing them cooking in the kitchen. It's not necessarily always these big things. It's those moments that are a part of your day to day that have maybe been a part of your life like that for years, forever, and are now gone. And you really miss those things, those simple things.
Okay, as you said that, it reminded me of one thing I wanted to mention, actually. It's so true. Like, when my mum was hospitalised, I'd often get a taxi home because it was so late. And there was one particular evening, about a month into her hospitalisation. My mum loved that song, Downtown. It's an old song, obviously, by Petula Clark, I think it is. It's like, Downtown. That song. Very happy song. And I remember mum would play it often before her admission. And I don't love the song, really, but now I love it because it reminds me of her. But at the time, I wasn't really that fond of it. But in the taxi, Kaylee, this is how surreal grief is. I would be in the back of the cab in the dark, and I would hear the song in my head, and my mum's face, she used to do this funny face, like with her eyebrows, and just to make us laugh. I can't do it, but I remember seeing that face so visually in my mind's eye, and hearing the song. I would be just driving down a London street or whatever, and it was just so surreal, and just like, you're not in this world, and that was an ordinary moment that became extraordinary because of the situation we were in.
Yes.
It's just a song, but it became everything. It just became everything.
And that feeling her around you, feeling that connection to her. Thank you for sharing. Really feel like, obviously, like hearing about your mum, I feel like it's so important to have these conversations, isn't it? And we did continuing bonds in the programme, but actually just giving space to talk about them, and these little moments and stories that you don't often get to share. Thank you for sharing her with me, and obviously with people listening.
She would have loved the work you're doing as well, by the way. She would have loved it.
So you gave a bit of advice for somebody lost in grief. If you could give some advice or say something to somebody who's thinking they might want to become a holistic grief coach, but they're not sure if they're ready, or maybe there's a bit of nervousness, what would you say?
I would say, just even if the part of you is thinking about joining, that is the sign that you absolutely should. Because for me, that's just how it was, Katie. I was not looking to do grief training in any aspect when I signed up to the programme back in March last year. Can't believe it's been that long, by the way. I remember just one day, we had a few conversations, you and I, didn't we? And then I sat on a bench one day in the spring, and I thought, I'm going for this. And it just felt like the right thing to do. Like, mind, body, soul, everything was just saying, yes, do it, sign up. And I don't, as I said, I was not thinking about signing up to anything. So I would say to anyone thinking about doing the programme to just go with your immediate instinct or intuition, that if you feel pulled or drawn to anything that you're saying, it's a sign that you're meant to be doing that, and to follow through on that. I'm a massive believer in signs. And to also, you don't stumble across people by accident in this world. We just haven't stumbled across your profile. Either they need your help in some capacity, or they need to become a coach. It's a massive sign, and you should follow through on it and just go for it. Don't overthink it.
Love that advice. And I think most people who've done this program, it's that kind of sense of like an inner knowing, and people who are like, I know I want to do something, I don't know what it is, I found your account and this is it. So like, this is the thing. And you just, I think if you know, and if you don't, all good. But it's like that, following that, I guess, inner compass.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to put it. An amazing way to put it. Sorry, that's exactly what I did, Katie, when it came to signing up to your training. I have to work with this person. I have to find out more, and just go for it.
Thank you. So I want to know a little bit about you as a coach. So now that you're qualified and you're bringing this to the world, what is unique about the grief coaching you offer? Talk to me a little bit about what it is you're offering people.
I work mainly with men and women who've lost parents. I think that my lived experience kind of pulled me towards that rigor of grief a bit more. And I guess for me, Kaylee, as a grief coach, in practice, it's all about, as we were taught, holding that safe space, letting someone's grief unfold naturally in a way that feels authentic to them, and just holding that space where we give them that sort of vacuum to create that awareness if and when they're ready. And the word empowerment always comes into my mind when I think about this, because for me personally, my grief journey, I felt so powerless for so long and worked so hard to get back up to that empowerment piece or empowerment aspect of me. And that's kind of where I would absolutely love to help people, that sort of path I would love to help people navigate. And young people may obviously have different goals, don't they? So I guess it's to help people, whatever is meaningful for them. For me, it's magic, it's empowerment. But for someone else, it might just be to feel joy without guilt, or to like Christmas again, to embrace Easter. It could just be these things where I really deeply resonate. So I feel like for me, that's where I naturally feel like I can really support people and really help them build over time that awareness, as well as that safety and that sort of contained vacuum.
And that sounds really, really important and so relatable. Everybody navigating grief feels like it's almost impossible to feel anything but this humongous weight of grey. And it's like coming back to this magic, and I see colours, and I'm thinking, how do you get there? Like, how do you get to a place where the world feels colourful and it feels safe and it feels joyful and my grief can exist. That sounds so powerful. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Hayley Hoffman. She's a coach, an EFT coach, and she has a book called You Are the Magic. And I was thinking maybe you would like to have a look at her, because it just feels like returning home to your magic is so important for you personally, and finding that.
Lovely. Yeah, I think magic is, Hayley, seasons feel like seasons when your parent is there, right? For me anyway, it was that loss of feeling and then trying to get that back, as you say. So that would definitely be something I would love to explore.
So we'll do some little quick fire questions, and then I'll ask you where people can find you, because I'm sure people listening who feel drawn to your work are going to want to reach out. So is there a book or a quote that has changed you?
Oh, yes. So a book that I read after my mum passed away, actually, it was a book and a film. I watched the film more, to be honest. So the book is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Very, very emotional book and film to watch. So I would like to apply a trigger warning for anyone, especially if they're in acute grief. For me, I've watched the film 5 or 6 times. And Reese Witherspoon is the main character that plays the part. I didn't really like her as an actress until I watched it, and so impressed with her performance. So I highly recommend it, with lots of regulation and resource to watch it when you're ready. And the quote is, "We are never ready for what we expect."
You're never ready for what we expect.
Did I say that right? Yeah, we are never ready. Yeah, we are never ready for what we expect.
Yeah, it's very, that makes you think, that quote.
Especially if you've had a parent who's poorly for a really long time, they prepare you, or hospitals and chaplains think that they're preparing you, but you're never ready for what you expect. So that's always stuck to me in that sort of grief capacity.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's giving you hope or magic right now?
Oh God, that's such a good question. I love hope and magic are the same thing for me. So the training that we did, potentially, and working with a lot more clients in the future as well. Knowing that I have the capacity, Hayley, to deal with difficult things now, the resilience and the capacity to deal with difficult things, I think that gives me hope. And also, I know this will sound really strange, but it goes to the spiritual work that we did in continuing bonds in the training, which we get told all the time, your loved one's always with you, right? But it doesn't mean much. But actually, since we've done the training, I honestly do feel my mum's sort of presence a lot more than I ever did. She's like, yeah, she most likely is with us in some capacity. I see her in my niece, I see her in my brothers, I'm seeing her in myself sometimes when I look in the mirror, which is lovely, but also a little bit freaky. But yeah, so I think our loved ones have their own way of living on in us.
Yes.
I think that's what gives me the magic.
I was on a call with my client the other day, and we were talking about going through quite a hard time, and there was a white feather just hanging from the fence here, and then a robin came and sat on top of the fence just above the feather, and I had to stop and say to her, this has just happened, because sometimes it's those moments, isn't it, of like that the feather is gone. So for me, it's like that didn't just happen. Finding that connection. And sometimes I feel very disconnected from my dad, and sometimes I feel him everywhere. And it's like attuning to that, and like finding that in whatever form that means and looks like for you.
That's really lovely. That's really, really, I love that. Yeah, lots of different spiritual things have happened. Like my mum passed on the 22nd of July 2017. And honestly, Kaylee, every date that I go on, the number 22 comes up somewhere, whether it's the building opposite the restaurant where I'm sitting, or like the table that we're sitting at. 22 always seems to come up, and I'm like, she's, mum's with me in some capacity. She is.
Love these signs. Is there I was gonna say a practice or tool that's changed you
from the training?
Might be from the training, might not.
I think from the training, Kaylee, I would say ocean breath. That's such a sacred practice for me, honestly. Whenever we do it in peer coaching or even on the training, that's the one that I love the most. It takes me to that sacred space that I just feel I feel connected to my mum, but I also feel connected to the part of me that still existed when she was here, because it takes me back in a really strange way to that experience. And don't ask me why, I always go back there in my mind. And then I would say the second practice is resource in a loving being.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Beautiful. Yeah. You like that one as well?
I feel like that's like my favorite. I don't know if you see in the manual, it's an image of like an angel holding a person. I always get different loving beings, when I do it. I don't always get the same one, but it's just this sense of being held, feeling held. And like that connection of like, oh, there's something else, there's something bigger than me.
That's so amazing. And I think that the way that you, the amount of, I mean, it was Kaylee, it was when you were, I can't even speak, when you were facilitating some of the tools like resourcing a loving being. Amazing. Just the way you could, I just absolutely could feel everything, and the energy from the cohort as well. Just beautiful, honestly. And yeah, I would definitely say that. And you know, in imagination, resourcing the body, very good one as well. So, I mean, pretty much every tool, but Ocean Breath and definitely Resourcing a Loving Being are the two top favorites for me.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Yes,
so, is there anything else you want to share before we talk about where people can find you?
Just a massive thank you for creating such a program, such an amazing, life-changing program. You know, I'm just ever so grateful. I mean, I don't think I can say it enough, Kaylee. In a podcast, I'll say it beyond. You should be super proud of yourself.
Thank you.
We're championing you just as much as you are us.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, honestly. I know I've said it to you before, but I feel so, you know, happy. I want to say warm to like be working with all of you. And yeah, I just feel like you create it, right? I create a structure and I can create a program, but you all have created the Holistic Grief Coach community. So thank you.
You're so welcome, Kaylee.
So how can people find you? Where can they go if they want to work with you or want to be supported by you?
So I'm on Instagram mainly. I think my handle is, let me get this straight, Kaylee. It's goodmorning_grief coaching.
Yeah.
And I think on Facebook, it's goodmorning/grief coaching.
We'll put links below. So
brilliant. That would be helpful. Yeah. I'm also on Telegram as well, but I don't know. I don't really use it that much, but that's another way to contact me as well.
Yeah, amazing. So if you want to get in touch with Ciara, got questions, maybe you want to find out about working with her, you can look at the links below and get in touch. Amazing. Right, it's been so nice chatting with you, and just that you bring everything when you show up to anything you do. So thank you so much for bringing your heart today and just telling us about you and your journey. And some of the things you shared are going to be so helpful for other listeners. And obviously, thank you for everything you've said. There's such lovely words about me, but I feel like what you've shared, you really wear your heart on your sleeve, Ciara. And I just feel like that's exactly like what people need in order to understand themselves. So yeah, I really, really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Kaylee. Likewise, absolutely. Be above and beyond.
All right then. Well, I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Holistic Grief Coach podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe, share this with a friend, or leave us a review. Every share and review helps this podcast reach more people who need it, and together we can shine more light into the grief space. And if you feel called to take this work deeper, or even train as a holistic grief coach, you can learn more by simply DMing me on Instagram @goodgrief_UK. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you soon.